Here we back. Yeah, we back. Now, today's going to be an interesting video, brothers. Today we're going to be breaking down a bombshell interview by the president of Niger, where he went into great detail about how France has been playing a behind-the-scenes role in the support and finance of terrorist groups in West Africa. Now, I have to say allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly just for, I don't want to get my channel destroyed. But, I'm going to just say allegedly. Now, me personally, I believe it because I know the French government. I know what they do. Everything he said in this interview, it comes as no surprise to me because everything that he is accusing the French of doing, the French have already tried these same exact strategies and tactics against my people over 2 centuries ago. So to me, it comes as no surprise. Now, what is surprising to me is the fact that the Western media has been completely silent on this topic. I haven't seen any major articles published on this interview, which is strange because, for example, whenever there's a terrorist attack, I see the articles come out within hours, right? But this bombshell interview where the president of Niger is calling out names, he's calling out locations and dates and times where things took place, specific dates and times and locations, and nobody's talking about this interview. Nobody's talking about it in the Western media. No major publication is talking about it. That I find very strange. Right? Now, the $1 million question that we've been asking ourselves for the longest time: where are these terrorist groups getting their funding? Where are they getting their weapons? Where are they getting their high-tech equipment? How do they have access to drones and anti-aircraft defense systems? These are impoverished men who are illiterate. They have no social mobility. How are they able to pull this off and sustain the momentum for the longest time? For years, the momentum never stops. The terrorism never stops. They're constantly getting resupplied. And in this video, the president of Niger, he basically confirmed all of our suspicions and speculations, right? All roads lead back to France. But of course, the Western media is silent on this. And I believe that the governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have taken this complaint to the United Nations. I believe the United Nations Security Council. But even then, the United Nations Security Council did nothing about it. So obviously, as we can see, I'm not surprised. Obviously, France, they're going to have the support of the Western media and Western organizations like the UN Security Council. But anyways, man, let's get into it, man. Now, the president of Niger, General Chiani, he conducted this interview in 3 languages, right? I believe the interview was conducted in French, and it was also conducted in Hausa, and I believe a 3rd African language as well. So obviously, he wants this to reach a wide audience. And in this video, I'm going to do him a favor and also translate it to English as well, so we can reach the English-speaking audience also, because I see the Western media obviously wants to bury this story and wants to act like they don't even see what's going on. But it is what it is. We're going to get into it today. We're going to talk about it today. Now, let's jump straight into the video. So in the beginning of the video, General Chiani, the president of Niger, he lays the groundwork by going into the history of Niger, right? When the French first arrived in the region, how did the citizens of Niger, the inhabitants of the region, what were their first interactions with the French like when they first invaded the territory during the days of the French colonial invasions? So let's get into the story. Let's get into the interview. Let's get it.
They cataloged the African people. They cataloged our customs. And through that, they have constructed a roadmap that will serve as a basis for the colonization of Africa, at least concerning Niger, with the infamously known Voulet-Chanoine column.
Now, the interview is many hours long, so I only took, the most significant parts of the interview. Now, at the beginning of the interview, he goes into, talking about the history, talking about the first Europeans that came on the continent, right? The missionaries and the explorers and things like that, right? And then afterwards came the colonial invaders and the military men, right? And he mentions these men up on the screen, Paul Voulet and Julien Chanoine. Now, these men, on behalf of the French government, were set out to invade the modern-day nations of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And President Chiani goes into great detail on the methods they employed in order to make that a reality. Now, take a look up on the screen. Let's learn about Paul Voulet and Julien Chanoine. I'm sure they don't teach us about this in school, so let's learn about these I don't even know the name to refer to them as, to probably insult them. But anyway, let's get into it. Take a look up on the screen. Across hundreds of square miles of the Sahara in the late 19th century, 2 bloodthirsty French officers, Paul Voulet and Julien Chanoine, unleashed one of the most gruesome campaigns of atrocities ever recorded in the history of colonialism. The Voulay-Chanoine mission is notorious for its extreme violence and disregard for human life. The actions of its leaders shocked even their contemporaries. France wanted to beat England to conquer the Chad Basin area and unite all of its French territories in West Africa. The expedition, now known as the Voulay-Chanoine mission, was one of pure horror and terror. It is rarely spoken about. The Voulay-Chanoine mission left Dakar on the coast of French West Africa in the late summer of 1898. They were heading for the Central African region of Lake Chad, with the aim of establishing effective borders between the French and British empires while pacifying a notoriously belligerent region. However, the mission descended into a horrific catalog of colonial violence and cruelty. In one small town, the Voulay-Chanoine expedition, named for the two French officers who led it, had left behind 1,000 corpses, among them the bodies of little African girls strung from tree branches. In another, Voulay and Chanoine's men had beheaded 100 villagers and dragged the bodies to a shallow grave, leaving the ground streaked with blood. In fury, Voulay and Chanoine ordered each village they passed to be attacked, with many villagers tortured, sexually assaulted, robbed, burned, murdered, and enslaved. Voulay and Chanoine's violence, as well as their gradual descent into utter barbarism, shocked even the bellicose Europe of that era and would forever scar France's claims that the country was on a civilization mission in Africa. Now, like I said before, these guys, they frame everything they do into, we're doing this for the betterment of civilization. We're doing this to improve civilization, right? So we're going to Niger, and we're chopping up the bodies of little African girls to help to bring civilization, right? As always. Now, let's get back into the interview. Let's get it.
I remembered well over 12,000 dead, Captain Paul Voulay, women and children hanged, shot, alive, and hanged in such a way that they remained alive while being devoured by hyenas. This is what we experienced here in Niger. And it is the lens through which France continued to view us until the 25th of July.
Now, shout out to President Chiani, obviously, a black man who knows who he is, a black man who knows his history, a black man who knows who his enemy is, most importantly. And everything he's saying comes as no surprise to me, because if you follow my channel, you go into my playlist section, I have a playlist entitled The Colonial System Unveiled, where I had read a book on my channel, a book that came out in 1814. It was published by the Haitian government, the administration of King Henry Christophe. The book was called The Colonial System Unveiled, and it goes into great detail about the atrocities, the crimes against humanity committed by the French colonial authorities in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, which is present-day Haiti, right? So everything he's saying when it comes to women and children being hanged and chopped up and eaten by animals, all of these same crimes happened in the French colony of Saint-Domingue during the Haitian Revolution and during the colonial period. The same thing he's talking about that happened to his ancestors, they happened to my ancestors. And this is why Pan-Africanism is important as a political ideology, because we have the same enemies, we have the same adversaries. The same thing the enemy did to you, he did to me. And the same exact way how this interview is being ignored, is being buried by the Western media, it's the same exact way that book, The Colonial System Unveiled, which came out back in 1814, and it's in my playlist section, go check it out afterwards. The same way they buried that book and they ignored that book. The same way they're trying to bury this interview and ignore this interview in the Western media. But it is what it is. We're going to talk about it on my channel. Now let's continue.
Because no word will be strong enough to describe the reaction of Macron, where they predicted the sky would fall on our heads, where they predicted to us a country that would collapse in less than 2 weeks, where they predicted to us a country that would last at most a month, where they predicted to us a country that could not survive. And it is in this sense that our army, our defense and security forces will grow stronger to prove that our security is our responsibility.
Now, in that part of the interview, President Chiani, General Chiani, he talks about the reactions of the French government when the military leaders had taken power, right? They said the French had said the country's going to collapse in less than 2 weeks. The country won't be able to survive without Western aid. They thought the sanctions would cripple and collapse the country in less than 4 weeks. But as we can see, going on damn near 2 years later, the country has still not yet collapsed. The military leaders are still in power. And in a funny, ironic twist of events, It was actually the French multi-billion-dollar multinational uranium company, Orano, that ended up collapsing in less than 2 weeks, right? As soon as we took away your uranium license, as soon as we took away your license to exploit the uranium mines, all of a sudden, the French multi-billion-dollar multinational company, Orano, collapsed in less than 6 months. Right? You talking all that shit. But guess what? The only thing that collapsed was your garbage ass uranium company, Orano. We put that shit in the dirt. We put that shit in the garbage can. Yeah, Orano is dead. Your multinational uranium company, Orano, is dead. You thought Niger was gonna collapse, but the only thing that collapsed was Orano. We put that bullshit in the dirt. Let's continue.
So these terrorists are currently benefiting from material support, financial support, and training support from France, with, of course, the complicity of other Western powers. Because if they simply told France to stop, I am sure France would stop. But since they are complicit and Niger deserves a correction, it is of course necessary to supervise the terrorists so that ultimately Niger falls and it is proven to the world that we are not worthy of any self-determination, that we are not worthy of taking responsibility for ourselves, and that we are nothing but incapable.
Now, in this section of the interview, President Chiani leaves nothing to speculation. He comes out directly. He points the finger directly at the enemy. He said, oh, you want to know who's sponsoring terrorism in Africa? You want to know who's sending all these high-tech military weapons to the terrorists in Africa? It's them boys over there in Paris. It's them boys over there at the Elysee. Yeah, them boys over there. Yeah, no speculation, no, it's them boys over there. And then he goes on to say that the other Western powers, they already have intelligence on this, right? The other Western nations already know what's going on, but they are deciding to collectively look the other way because they feel like the regime in Niger deserves to be corrected or reprimanded or punished. So collectively, they're deciding to look away as France gets involved in all this type of, mischief and criminality. Which at the end of the day is nothing new, right? Because like I said, 200 years ago when France was committing all types of crimes against humanity, the Western world looked away. During the Haitian Revolution, the Western world looked away. They acted like they didn't see what was going on, right? When the French was going around killing men, women, and children, feeding innocent people to dogs, hanging people and shooting people and chopping off limbs, the Western world looked away. The same way in 1898 with Paul Voulet and Julien Chanoine, the Western world looked away when they went around destroying whole entire villages, massacring whole entire villages, right? The same way today, the terrorists with their Western-backed weapons, with their Western military equipment, instead of launching an investigation, we got the CIA, we got the MI6, we got the DGSE, right? Instead of launching an international investigation to track the origins of these weapons, right? How did this high-tech material end up in the hands of some impoverished, illiterate desert dwellers, right? How did they get into their hands? Not only that, but how did they get into their hands and how were they able to operate it? How were they able to have the knowledge, obtain the knowledge to know how to use it? How do they know how to use a drone? How do they know how to use an anti-aircraft defense system? How do they know how to use these things, right? Because, for example, if a nation sells military equipment to another nation, they usually have to send out trainers, right? They usually have to send out personnel to teach the other nation how to use this weapon, right? How to use this missile, how to use this aircraft, how to use this drone, right? So how did these terrorists, right? How did these, like I said, these guys are impoverished, illiterate, they have no international connections. How did they get their hands on these weapons, number one? And number two, how did they obtain the knowledge on how to use it during combat? That's the question we got to ask ourselves. But I love what he said towards the end, right? President Chiani said the reason why France is hell-bent on destroying the AES, the Alliance of Sahelian States, is because they want to show to the world, right? You see, Africans can't govern themselves. They can't do nothing without us. You see, when we left, look what happened. The terrorists took over. The terrorists overran the country once we left, right? Because I'm the everlasting benevolent white man, so I have to come save you. Without me, you can't do nothing, right? They want that sentiment implanted into your mind. Without the white man, I can't do shit. Without the white man, I ain't shit. Without the white man, I can't do anything without the white man, right? So that's why they're invested in destroying their operation, destroying what they got going on. So in case there are other nations or other leaders who are looking towards the AES for inspiration, right? They want to make an example out of Mali, Burkina Faso with Niger. So other leaders, other nations, other Africans don't get any ideas about rising up and stomping your feet and standing on business 10 toes down for your sovereignty.
The destabilization strategy is simple. It consists, firstly, as I said, of financing, equipping, training, and positioning terrorist movements along the border of the Confederation, not only of Niger, but of the Confederation, because the objective is the dismantling of the Confederation.
Now, in this segment of the interview, President Chiani says that the destabilization strategy of France is not only in the financing and the arming and supporting, providing logistics and training to these terrorist elements, but also by positioning them along the border of the Confederation, along the border of Mali, Burkina Faso with Niger, which, like I said, this is an ancient strategy of France, right? If you look at the Haitian Revolution, what did the French do directly after the Haitian Revolution, after they admitted defeat, after the French, signed the agreement that said, yeah, we lost. We lost to the black man. What did they do? There was a garrison of French soldiers that went across the border to the Dominican territory, the modern day Dominican territory, and they began waging war. They began launching assaults from the Dominican border. They began kidnapping Haitian children at the border to sell them into slavery. The same thing President Chiani is accusing them of doing, of setting up shop and positioning hostile elements along the border, is the same thing they did to the Haitians 200 years ago. That's why everything is saying to me, I know it's 100% facts. I know he's spitting facts. And only an ignorant bastard would give the French the benefit of the doubt. The French deserve no benefit of the doubt. I know what these bastards are about. Why do you think the Haitian army invaded the Dominican territory in 1805? It's because of the hostile actions that were taken by the French military during that time. So the Haitian army under Dessalines mobilized and marched into the modern day Dominican territory and burned everything to the ground. Now let's continue.
They made contact with the terrorists. They offered them, the terrorists of the Bakura wing with Abu, their leader, and the terrorists of the ISWAP wing with Abu Musa al-Barnawi as leader, financing, training, and equipment on the condition that these movements agree to go to war against the Republic of Niger. They made this proposal to the two wings of the former Boko Haram of Yusuf Mohammed, if you remember. When they made the proposal on the night of October 25th to 26th, 2023, the Bakura wing was more conciliatory.
Now, like I said earlier, it's going to be hard to convince me that President Chiani is simply telling stories because, like I said during this whole interview, he's naming names, he's naming organizations, he's naming locations, he's naming dates and times, right? Oh, this leader of this organization, they said this and that on this day, in this location, right? It's way too specific to be lying, bruh. It's way too specific, at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, October 17th. Like, bro, it's too specific to be telling lies, bruh. Now, Chiani says that the French government had offered financing, training to these terrorist elements on the condition that once they obtain these weapons would be used to remove the current government from power, right? Wage war against the current administration in power to remove them from power. And of course, hypothetically, if this were to happen, right? Let's say the president of Niger was removed from power due to terrorists overrunning his territory. This is how it would be framed in the Western media, right? Good evening. Tonight, we turn to the tragic collapse of yet another African government. This time in Niger, the military administration has been overrun by militant groups. As you may recall, just a year ago, the military government decided to kick out the Western forces that had been fearlessly assisting them in the fight against terrorism. And now, without the trusted assistance of Western expertise, Niger quickly descended into chaos and anarchy. Many critics argue that the military government's naive decision to sever ties with their long-standing ally France is the reason behind the deterioration of the security apparatus. This is what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. The Nigerian military thought they could do it on their own, and if only they had stayed the course with their Western allies, this tragedy could have been avoided. But there you have it, folks, a cautionary tale of what happens when you turn your back on the Western forces. Yo, I'm telling you, man, that's how the news report would have been framed, right? If these rebels, who are, as we know, obviously being supported by some hidden hands behind the scenes, if they manage to overrun the government, that is how the news story would be framed, right? It wouldn't be framed as, where are these terrorists getting their weapons and their assistance from? No, they'd be talking about how the Nigerian military, they turned their back on France, and this is what happens when you turn your back on the great Western powers, and you turn your back on your Western ally, France, and now they overran the country. They would be throwing dirt in their face. They would be pedestalizing France as the savior, right? Oh, now France can come back and restore order, right? That is how the news article in the Western media would be framed, right? That is how they would be framed. And like I said, still to this day, as I'm recording this video, I have not seen any major article going in detail about anything regards to this interview, the details that were laid out in this interview. The Western media has simply decided to not even acknowledge the interview, at least at this current moment. Maybe they might talk about it later, but as of right now, they haven't said a word. They haven't said a word. And if they are talking about it, they're only talking about it to discredit what he said, but not actually going in detail about what he said. But anyway, let's continue.
The ISWAP wing had openly said that it was not ready to go with the French to attack any Muslim country whatsoever. To tell you the strategy used by France, this is not the first contact. They continued and maintained permanent contact with these terrorist movements. And as I said, God is with the truthful. We have, through special operations conducted, arrested terrorist leaders who have declared to us everything I have just told you and that I am going to tell you.
Now, in this section of the interview, in the beginning of the clip, President Chiani said that the French had approached the Islamic State in the West African province. That's a terrorist group in the region. And they had rejected the offer and said that they're not going to wage war against fellow Muslims, right? I'm not going to take money or, bribes in exchange to wage war against fellow Muslims. I'm not going to do that. But he went on to say that France has maintained communication with other terrorist factions in the region. Of course, besides the Islamic State in the West African province, you got other organizations such as JNIM, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate. You have the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. You have the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. You have another group called the Lakrara. It's a whole bunch of different factions and different terrorist groups causing instability in the region. Now let's continue.
Notably the one I spoke about, Ahmed Abubakar, the former head of the NIA agency. The French offered them to open a base in the Sokoto region. This was in March 2024, March of this year. They offered them, once this base was open, to make the junction between the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, which operates in Mali, and the terrorist elements of ISWAP, which are in the Lake Chad Basin. We called Ahmed Abubakar Rauf to inform him of the intention that is emerging in the sense of opening a Lakurwa front in Sokoto.
Now, like I said, it's going to be hard to convince me that President Chiani is simply telling stories or freestyling over the top of his head, because like I said, he's giving you date, times, locations, and individuals who were involved. So in this part of the interview, he specifically names a Nigerian government official who resigned from his post earlier this year. Take a look up on the screen. Nigeria's intelligence chief, Ahmed Abubakar, resigns. The Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, Ahmed Rufai Abubakar, has resigned after a meeting with President Bola Tinubu on Saturday. So he resigned over the summer. And President Chiani said he had confidential conversations with him back in March. And he alleges that this individual, Ahmed Abubakar, a Nigerian government official, has knowledge in regards to France's involvement and France's machinations with the terrorist groups in the region, right? So a few months after, this guy resigned from his post, mysteriously with no reason given. Like I said, President Chiani giving you dates, times, locations, and individuals named who are involved. So like I said, it's up to those individuals to come forward and prove him wrong. Now, I'm seeing a lot of the headlines in the Western media trying to, pit Nigeria and Niger against each other, right? Instead of focusing on the allegations in the interview, which are directed at France, right? I'm seeing a lot of folks get sidetracked and trying to make it, Niger versus Nigeria, right? And I'm seeing a lot of Nigerians taking offense as if they're being personally attacked. No, He's not talking about, President Chiani is not attacking the citizens of Nigeria, the people of Nigeria, the nation of Nigeria. No, he's talking about your authorities. He's talking about your leaders, right? And me, myself, I've heard Nigerians themselves say that the government authorities in Nigeria either directly support or indirectly enable the terrorist elements that wreak havoc in the country, right? So I've heard Nigerians say this themselves about their government, saying how their governments are in cahoots with the terrorist elements. So now I'm seeing these same Nigerians all of a sudden act high and mighty, acting like they're taking offense at what President Chiani is saying. He's simply repeating what Nigerians themselves have said for years, right? So don't try to get all high and mighty now because President Chiani said it, because Nigerians themselves have been saying it for a very long time, right? And Ahmed Abubakar even resigned from his post months after this interaction with President Chiani. So listen, at the end of the day, man, don't take it as a personal attack when these allegations are being made. This is not a personal attack against the citizens of Nigeria, against the 200 million citizens of Nigeria. No, we're talking about the government. We're talking about the authorities, right? So like I said, don't make this be a divide and conquer thing, because that's exactly what the French did back during the Haitian Revolution, right? When the French went over the border to the Dominican territory and the Haitian army marched in and destroyed everything, that left a permanent strain on the relations between Haitians and Dominicans for the next 200 years, right? Because the French wanted to go cause trouble and cause chaos, right? So don't let that become an issue between the two nations. At the end of the day, we are brothers, right? And just like 200 years ago, it wasn't everybody in the Dominican territory that was working side by side with the French. It was only the colonial authorities in the Spanish side of the island that was working in cahoots with the French because they wanted to destabilize the Haitian side. It wasn't everybody on the Dominican side that was working with the French. It was only the colonial authorities, right? The same way today, it's only certain Nigerian authorities, who even Nigerians themselves have said it, that enable the terrorist elements to thrive and survive and provide logistics and funding and support, right? I mean, Nigerians said this themselves, right? So President Chiani is simply echoing sentiments that Nigerians have repeated over the years, right? So don't take offense now. Don't try to act too high and mighty now and take it as a personal attack. It's not a personal attack, right? And like I said, President Chiani provided dates, times, locations, and he named the names of the individuals involved. So it's up to them to prove him wrong. Now let's continue.
France did not stop there. France continued then in the Lake Chad basins. What did they do? After the meeting of October 25th to 26th, they returned on the night of January 10th to 11th to land a large batch of equipment, weapons, and others for the benefit of the Bakura terrorists. All the weapons deemed obsolete by the French were replaced. They equipped them with these weapons. They equipped them with anti-tank weapons. This happened on January 29th, 2024. Later, they returned, and it only escalates. They promised 7 speedboats to the Boko Haram movement. On November 7th, they returned with, mind you, for the Bakura wing, 1 billion CFA francs. For the reluctant wing, ISWAP, they promised 4 billion CFA francs.
Now, once again, President Chiani providing you with dates, times, and locations, and the perpetrators involved in the crimes. Now, obviously, he admitted in this interview that the information that he's getting has been revealed to him by terrorists that have been captured and arrested, right? As you already know, when the terrorists get arrested, obviously, we're going to torture you, and then we're going to, get the information up out of you, right? So where'd you get his money from? Where'd you get his weapons from? How'd you learn how to use these weapons? Who gave them to you, right? So the terrorists, obviously, because they have no honor, right? They have no honor and integrity. So they snitching, right? The terrorists get in custody, they start snitching, right? I guarantee you give the terrorists a hamburger and a cigarette, they start snitching. They start telling everything. Now, President Chiani has said these men have been provided with weapons, speedboats, 1 billion CFA francs, which I believe is like 1.5 million US dollars, right? Now, keep in mind, the CFA franc, France is the one that has the printing press on the CFA franc, right? There is no African government that can print CFA francs. France has exclusive control in regards to the production of CFA francs. That's number one. So if there are terrorist elements, terrorist groups that have a large, vast supply of CFA francs, right? It's not too many sources. It's not too many places they can get their hands on that. You got to keep in mind, these men are impoverished, illiterate, nomadic men in the desert, right? So, These are not some high tech, high intelligent, type of men who are involved in business and enterprise that are making money. No, these are some illiterate, impoverished booty scratchers, which means that the only way they are able to get their hands on such a large amount of CFA francs is because somebody is giving them the CFA francs, because they have no infrastructure. They have no financial means to engage in economic activity in the middle of the goddamn desert to amass billions of dollars in CFA francs. That's number two. So obviously, we already know what time it is. We already know what time it is, bro. The CFA franc is printed by the Bank of France, and they can literally print however many CFA francs they want to. They can print up 1 billion CFA francs right now.
Still, to give you an idea, to give the people the scale of the great international plot that is being hatched, they asked Boko Haram to form a company of 150 men that they will position in northern Niger, then rebel movements that are in northern Chad, and they will form a common front installed inside Niger, in the chains of northern Niger, to wage war on Niger. So we have the fighters installed in the chains of northern Niger, we have the fighters installed in the Lake Chad Basin by France, we have the Lakurwa fighters.
Now, in this segment of the interview, President Chiani is speaking about how the various terrorist factions were supposed to come together under one banner, right? And if you remember, back in early December, when the Mali military had destroyed those terrorist leaders, right? Those many terrorist leaders. That was the day after those terrorist leaders were gonna combine and unite under one banner. And the next day, the Mali military liquidated them, evaporated them, eviscerated them, destroyed them, right? Incinerated them. Right, so President Chiani in this segment of the interview is also saying how the various terrorist factions were gonna come under one single banner to wage war against the alliance of Sahelian states, right? Wage war against Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
The billions of dollars that are in the possession of these terrorist movements and their local sponsors, of course, exceed everything you can imagine being available in the reserves of Central Africa, which uses the CFA, of course, and of the West African Monetary Union. The terrorists have enough funding since the CFA is manufactured by France. And France has the support of the European Union to manufacture as many CFA francs as it wants, as long as they are not euros or dollars. What is the African country that manufactures the CFA, that has the printing press? It is France? Absolutely.
Now, in this segment of the interview, President Chiani further implicates France's involvement by saying that the amount of financial resources available in terms of CFA francs that are at the disposal of these terrorist leaders exceeds the amount that could be given by a central government in Africa, right? So the reserves of Central African governments, West African governments, they don't even have enough in their reserves to supply these terrorists with the amount of financing they currently have at their disposal, which means that the CFA franc could only be coming from one place, the source, which is the Bank of France. Now, listen, bombshell interview. President Chiani, I believe that he conducted this interview in multiple languages, right? French, and then multiple African languages, right? So he did the interview in French for multiple hours, then another version in Hausa, and then another language, I forget the third language that he did it in, but he did it in multiple languages, right? So this can reach a wide audience. And I just gave the English translation of it. So, we spreading the word, man. We spreading the word because I don't understand why a head of state comes with this high level information. As you already know, a head of state has access to classified documents. They receive intelligence reports every morning. So he has access to information that we don't have, right? He has terrorists in custody who are spilling the beans, right? Giving up information in terms of who their sponsors are. And on Christmas Day, he comes out in front of the nation and gives out all the information on state TV. And not a single Western publication decided to pick it up and cover the story. But let a goddamn terrorist blow up a goddamn supermarket. I guarantee y'all all gonna run with the story within hours to discredit the administration. But now the administration comes with a bombshell declaration, one of the craziest declarations in history, and y'all not even talking about it. Y'all not opening your mouth. And the only websites that are talking about it are only talking about it to discredit him and throw dirt on his name. Man, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. But like I said, he gave you dates, times, and locations. He went in front of the camera and said, I spoke to this guy on March 1st, 2024. The French came on this day, October 25th, 2023, right? They dropped this off to this person on December 15th, 2023 at 3 p.m. Like, he gave you exact locations. He told you, I spoke to this government official on this date and he could prove what I'm saying is right. This terrorist leader told me he spoke to the French government on this day, on this time, and they gave him this and that. Listen, it's way too specific to be lying. When folks be lying, they don't be specific like that, bro. They be vague, they be ambiguous. Nobody be lying and be like, hey man, I spoke to such and such, last Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Like, that's not a lie, bro. But as we can see, they're trying to manufacture another Libya situation or another Syria situation where the nation gets overrun by rebels who in reality are really terrorists, right? Terrorists, that's what they are, right? Terrorists who are going to be rebranded as liberators, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to overrun the territory with terrorists, so in hopes that the regime will fall and the terrorists that take over the government will be presented to the world as liberators, similar to the guy in Syria who was a former Al-Qaeda commander who is being presented to the world as a liberator of the Syrian nation.
In short, the Islamic State, which today is cheered by the great Western powers. Just like Al-Qaeda to seize power, you see it very clearly. In Damascus, Syria under the figure of the former terrorist, renamed as a democrat, liberator, man of peace, the former eagle turned into a dove, Mohammed al-Julani.
Now, shout out to that good brother. He basically emphasized what I just said, right? This guy right here, the current leader of Syria, a former Al-Qaeda commander, was celebrated by the Western powers. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, he celebrated his rise to power, right? He went on Twitter like, wow, I salute the Syrian people. France stands with you, right? Celebrated this guy. United States had a $10 million bounty on this guy's head less than a decade ago, right? Had him on posters all across the world. Stop this terrorist. $10 million reward, right? Now, look at it. The United States lifts the $10 million bounty on the Syrian leader's head, right? Now, look at it. The U.S. delegation traveling to Syria, right? So they're trying to do the same thing in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Got all these belligerent terrorist groups operating in the region, hoping that the regime falls. And once the terrorists rise to power, you're going to see the same exact thing. Former terrorists, former Al-Qaeda commanders are going to be rebranded as liberators, as Democrats. Telling you, bro, the game is crazy, man. The game is crazy. But anyways, man, I'm going to keep track of this whole situation. I might come back with some follow-up videos. Who knows? Maybe not. We'll see. But salute President Chiani. Salute to the big dog. Like I said, the Western media hasn't said a goddamn word about it. That's how you know. That's how you know you was spitting facts. When the Western media shut their goddamn mouth. The Western media shut their goddamn mouth. They don't even want to talk about this shit. They silent as some church mouse. They don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to talk about it, bro. It's too specific. It's way too particular. It's way too in detail. You cannot really talk about it without discrediting the Western powers altogether. Anyways, man, it's your boy Nevercard. That's laying back in the Billy. Yes, indeed. Cash app in the description. Support the channel, man. Support the album. Peace.
No. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city they loving me. Standing alone I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They trying to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I've been gaining weight. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drive a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I I told her we making the news. Yeah, making the news, making the news, breaking the rules. Yeah, know that we making the news.